After the Walt Disney Company fired Gina Carano for what now seem like very banal statements where she wanted people to come together and not be mean to each other, we're wondering what the heck is going on with Disney as people like Mark Hamill, who we believe is working on the Mandalorian movie, are out there spouting nonsense and perhaps dividing the country even more. Today, we will apply the Gina Carano standard that Bob Iger set forth, and you decide whether he should stay or go. We need to use the Gina Carano standard here about who should stay and who goes away. And today we're talking about Mark Hamill. Now, folks, before we get into reading what Mark Hamill had to say, I need to give just a little bit of background here. We've reported repeatedly here on this channel that we believe that Mark Hamill is working on the Mandalorian movie set to come out in 2026. Under the direction of one Jon Favreau, co-written and co-directed with Dave Filoni, and undoubtedly the talons and tendrils of Kathleen Kennedy all throughout it. Not a good sip of coffee to be found on any of the production sets. Her barista skills are not impressive. Folks, here is what our dear friend Mark Hamill had to say. Ignore me up here. You know what? We'll read what I had to say. But first, let's read Mark's, okay? So Mark Hamill, again, folks, entertainment, celebrities, they can't contain themselves. We wish they would stop talking about this stuff because then we would be talking about the box office, but they cannot get out of their own way. Mark Hamill says, "There is no place for violence in politics ever. I'm grateful the former president is okay. That said, never forget that this is the guy who promised the NRA he would do nothing on gun control and told victims of shootings to just get over it." So, Donald Trump, nearly assassinated, someone dies, people are critically injured, and Mark Hamill decides that he is going to put out falsehoods. And I'm going to show you that it's false in just a moment. But I said to this, Mark Hamill uses an attempted assassination in which at least one person was murdered to promote false partisan propaganda. Mark should be removed from the Mandalorian movie production. And I make that on the basis of what happened to Gina. Because Gina just said, hey, maybe we should stop hating each other. And that was enough to get rid of her. So, folks, since Mark Hamill says that Donald Trump, maybe he didn't deserve it, but we shouldn't forget about him saying that you got to get over it when people get shot. Here's what he actually had to say, folks. We'll go to the original video and see if Mark Hamill is a douchebag or if he's got something legitimate to say here. Here's the video.
Hey, bro, don't forget, she changed her pronouns to beep, bop, boop as well. That was violence.
Oh, travesty.
Victims and families touched by the terrible school shooting yesterday in Perry, Iowa. To the entire community, we love you, we pray for you, and we ask God to heal and comfort really the whole state and the pain that you have. This is something that's very unique to your state. We're really with you as much as anybody can be. It's a very terrible thing that happened, and it's just horrible to see that happening. That's just horrible. So surprised to be here. We have to get over it. We have to move forward. But to the relatives and to all of the people that are so devastated right now, to a point they can't breathe, they can't live, we are with you all the way. We're with you, and we love you and cherish you.
All right, so let's go back to the comment by Mark Hamill. Now we've seen the original in its full context. He told victims of shootings to just get over it. Okay. Guys, I got to say, I think that this kind of rhetoric out of people like Mark Hamill, if you're going to fire Gina Carano over what she said and what she did, then Mark Hamill's got to go. He can't be Luke Skywalker no mo. I know, Michelle, you got to go, so why don't you weigh in first and let us, what do you think in comparison to what Gina did versus what Mark is doing here, which I think is absolutely vile? What do we do with the standard they set?
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't. Their standard is very simple. You agree with them or you're gone. So that is their standard. It is what it is. I think we should all keep that in mind with how we spend our money. Let me requote the words that were used about who I just got to meet this weekend and who was as lovely as she always comes across in person. And as she said when I was up there and I was talking about her case, as she said, I don't have anything to hide, but they have everything to hide. These people said that she was abhorrent. What she was trying to get across, as you said, which was really just don't hate anyone. So basically, that is
fair.
what Disney. Yeah, it is. So that is their standard. You either walk the line of their political beliefs, Bob Iger and everyone else, or a lot of other people there's political beliefs, or you're gone. So that is their standard. But as far as Mark Hamill, to me, what's most pathetic in that, besides the fact that, as you pointed out, Trump didn't say that, and he's spreading misinformation, is the fact that there, with certain things, there's a time and a place. And I would say that to both sides on certain issues. But good Lord, someone just lost their son, their spouse, their father maybe, and they're trying to grapple with what just happened. As a nation, we just watched a former president get shot at, which I've not witnessed in my lifetime. And Mark Hamill wants to talk about gun control. I mean, get over yourself, Mark. Like not the right time nor the place. If you want to talk about gun control, have at it, but don't do it literally dancing on the grave of someone who just died in less than 24 hours since that person died. It's
misrepresenting really what the man who shot said. It's insane.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
X-Wing, you seem to be disagreeing. Your face says
not
you're not at all in
I-
agreement with any of us here at all.
I just think shame needs to make a really big comeback in America. Shame really needs to come back.
Amen.
You know what I'll do is I'll reference from a great man, Ronald Reagan. I will reference a quote. He was shot. He was taken to the hospital. Mm-hmm. He's bleeding in his lung, and he looks at the doctors and he says, "I hope none of you guys are Democrats," because he just had an attempt on his life. And the doctor looked at him and said, "Today we're all Republicans, Mr. President." That's how you respond.
Right. Where is that sentiment? Where is that sentiment today from people like Mark Hamill? And if you don't, if you can't weigh in without misrepresenting the person who has just been shot at an event where people died, then don't weigh in at all. It's that simple. Just, if you can't do it, then don't do it. Mark, we're sorry. Yeah. Could you at least embody the spirit of Luke Skywalker for a moment of your life? Just do it for a moment. Culture, any thoughts?
Of course I did that. Look, mom taught us this, at least most good moms. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. That's essentially what X-Wing, yourself, and everybody is saying. And look, everything that I needed to know I learned in kindergarten is somewhat accurate. If you were taught properly, you learned civility, how to be polite, courtesy, et cetera, et cetera. You learn manners. You learn to consider the larger things around you. And that's when your world kind of grew. That's when your worldview really, truly started to shift as a young person, was right about kindergarten. And so I always go back and say, okay, if I just apply the old rules that I grew up with, I probably am going to be safe. Mark Hamill's never been safe. In fact, he's quite detestable. And if we are applying the Gina Carano rule, I can see a whole lot of people at Disney losing their jobs right now. It's not just tied to Mark. It's tied to pretty much all the performative baloney sausage that went along with all the things today, including the news report that we covered. So truthfully, that's what's required in these moments, is for everybody to speak truth. We had some insane person do something despicable. They were compelled to do so by a larger amount of rhetoric than I have ever witnessed in my lifetime. The likes of which, I could only have imagined maybe back in the 40s. And that's disgusting to me. Doing all of the things that are being done right now, including Davro, these activities, these things to misdirect every piece of behavior that you're actually doing. You're gaslighting. You're essentially projecting what you feel onto everything else. That's all we're seeing right now. It is a whirlwind of propaganda, misinformation, and everything else. And of course, they accuse anybody who actually has the facts or any shred of detail. They tear them apart, and then they become the victim because they were pushed back against because of said facts, science, etc. I'm tired of it, but at the same time, there's a time and a place. Just to refer to what Michelle said, because we don't have that anymore. And
did anyone live through the Red Scare?
Yeah, of course I did. I'm old.
Okay, so if you lived through that, does this feel reminiscent of that at all?
This is way beyond the pale. Even beyond the idea that my parents talk about being taught to climb under a desk. I'm like, that ain't gonna work, kids. It's gonna go up like a matchstick anyway.
My dad talks about that all the time.
Yeah, it's like
why am I under a desk?
Those desks were mighty sturdy, Culture. Very sturdy desks back in the day.
Lead paint. I'm just saying, maybe it wasn't a bad idea.
To what extent do people really associate an actor or actress's comments with the company itself? And then we use some extreme examples, right? So, and I gave the example, I think, of Mel Gibson. And Mel Gibson doesn't work in Hollywood anymore because he's pretty, and he's a super talented man. But he's not only anti-Semitic, but he can't keep his mouth shut about it being anti-Semitic. I suppose if I worked in Hollywood for any appreciable amount of time, I'd be anti-Semitic myself. But I think
I never thought we'd have to flip something out from Ron Coleman about.
Well, I mean, I don't think I would have much use for Hollywood Jews at all, starting now, and I've never worked there at all. But so there, but on the other hand, California law does prohibit some measure of this. But we do start with the premise that the company can decide. And I do think, though, that this is a great, if Gina's, let's put it this way, Gina's, I think, gonna win the motion to dismiss. It hasn't been decided yet. Her lawyers might consider putting in a supplemental submission demonstrating, because if you remember, in their opposition to the motion to dismiss by Disney, they cited a number of awful Disney talent comments that evidently Disney did not find particularly offensive. So they might want to throw this one onto the fire as an additional example for the court to consider. I think you raise a good point there.
Lauren, we've been talking about Mark Hamill and the vile thing that he has posted out here, where, yes, he says that there's no place in violence. He's happy that Trump is okay. And then he goes on to put forth these disingenuous, I think that's as generous as I can be, these disingenuous claims about the former president, as if that is somehow justifying in some small way what happened. Lauren, if we apply the Gina Carano standard to this from Disney, what should happen here in your estimation? And even just from a corporate common sense standpoint, what do you think Disney should do when their actors are acting this way?
Well, I suppose the first thing that I would say is I think everybody right now ought to be thinking real carefully about anything that they want to say online for a little bit. This is a time for some pretty serious self-reflection and considering how we've allowed our speech to get to the level that it is, to allow you to demonize people with different opinions from the other side of the aisle and consider them less than human. And so just as a starting point, I think everybody ought to be pausing on posting just about anything when it comes to these kind of things. As to Mark Hamill himself, if you don't mind me using his X tag, I don't think there's really a need for Mark to be involved in anything going forward anyway. He's been brought in primarily as a courtesy because he's attached to the legacy character, and Lucasfilm has wanted to show respect to him for his work in the past and to allow him to be on set and give pointers to the people who are actually acting as the stand-ins. But that's a courtesy. It's not something that's necessary going forward if you're going to be using Luke. And I think there's lots of potential options that they could use there if they want to continue to use Luke and they don't want to use Mark. Will they do that? Probably not. He has the opinion that their side heavily favors. But should that happen? Yeah, I think it probably should. I think it's time to stop tolerating this kind of nonsense. And we need to get back to a place where we recognize that those on the other side of the aisle might have some valid opinions and that we're all allowed to have our opinions without being under threat.
Right. We need each other. We need each other. A lot of times, your place in politics is sort of determined by your psychological proclivities, I guess is the way I would say it. And we've got to find a way to get along. But I also think that part of getting along is all sides need to tell the truth. And this my truth junk, I'm over it, because all it is it's anti-logos. It's an anti-God position. It's an anti-science position. It's anti-objectivity position. And our news media, our corporations have follied with it, and it's faltering the nation. This idea that there is no objective truth. It's whatever you believe. And power and narrative that's what we should believe in. Enough of it. And folks, that is a wrap. We know this is a heavier topic than we typically cover here on the channel, but we do not shy away when the news of the day intersects with entertainment. Folks, we hope you had a great time here today. Hope you learned a little bit. Take this away, and folks, as you go on your way, make sure to do and say the right things, the good things, the truthful things that help unite and help fight against wrongdoing. All right, folks, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, keep having fun. And if you're around for the rest of the day, make sure to check out T3PO. They're doing a special live stream later today where they will explain how streaming is about to change forever.